Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today to discuss the impact of animal agriculture on wolf recovery. We are so excited to partner with our friends from Catskill Animal Sanctuary for today's program, and any donations made during the registration process will directly benefit the rescued farmed animals at their sanctuary. My name is Dana, and I will be moderating today's program. As some housekeeping items before we begin, your microphones and cameras are disabled, but we welcome respectful questions and commentary here, so please feel free to use the chat and Q&A functions at the bottom of your Zoom screen as needed. If you have questions you would like us to answer, please type them into the Q&A box so we can more readily locate them and share them with our educators. We will try to get to as many questions as we can in our time today. Questions will be posed to the educators during the Q&A portion toward the end of the program. With that, I will be turning over the screen to Regan at the Wolf Conservation Center to get us started.
Thank you, Dana, and hello, everyone. Thank you for joining the Wolf Conservation Center and Catskill Animal Sanctuary for our joint program today. For those of you who might be unfamiliar with the Wolf Conservation Center or Catskill, I do have just two quick intro slides, just so for anyone who might be unfamiliar, we can all get on the same page. So today's program, as Dana mentioned, is going to explore the impacts of animal agriculture on wolf recovery. And when we say animal agriculture, in this particular case, I'm going to be discussing the impacts of livestock grazing, primarily public lands grazing, on wolf populations out west, especially on the endangered Mexican gray wolf population. Today's program will be broken up into three parts, as we'll discuss in just one moment. And so you will also be able to see rescued farmed animals at Catskill Animal Sanctuary and some of the Wolf Conservation Center's ambassador gray wolves later on in the program as well. The Wolf Conservation Center is focused on protecting and preserving wolves in North America through science-based education programming, participation in recovery and release programs for endangered wolf species, and advocacy efforts. So we do work to recover wolves primarily by teaching people about them, highlighting the challenges they face in terms of recovery, and giving individuals tools they can use to make sure they are creating a better world for wolves and wildlife. We are also stakeholders, direct stakeholders in Mexican gray wolf and red wolf recovery. We participate in species survival plans for both of these endangered animals. We currently have 15 critically endangered red wolves that reside on site, and we have 21 Mexican gray wolves as well. As mentioned, this is a joint program with Catskill Animal Sanctuary. We will be joined with members of their staff later on during the program, and they can best speak to their organization and its mission. But again, in case anyone is unfamiliar, the Catskill Animal Sanctuary rescues farmed animals, ignites social change to end their exploitation, and champions vegan living. Now, for some of you, you might be familiar with the Wolf Center's education mission, whether you have attended programs on site in the past or you've taken advantage of some of our numerous distance learning program options, such as our scientific webinars or even our virtual field trips for students across the country. And these programs are designed to emphasize wolf biology, the benefits of wolves in healthy ecosystems, and the current status of wolf recovery across the United States. We do also work to dispel myths and misunderstandings individuals might have about wolves. And one of the lesser known challenges facing wolves is the impact of livestock grazing and the livestock industry on wolf recovery. And we feel as though it's very important to highlight this challenge, especially as we move forward with wolves losing protections in certain areas of the country. It's very important for us all to be aware of the many challenges they face in terms of growing very healthy and viable populations. And that's why we're bringing today's program to you. So today's program will be broken up into three parts. We'll begin with this very short presentation about wolves and the livestock industry and how these two are intertwined. We will then switch to Catskill Animal Sanctuary, where their wonderful educators will introduce us to some of their rescued farmed animals and also highlight the impacts of animal agriculture on those animals themselves so we can become better informed advocates. And then we will transition back and we will see some of the wonderful wolves that allow the public to connect to their wild counterparts, thanks to our 3 ambassador gray wolves. Now, with wolves and the livestock industry in particular, they have a long history, and with wolves, unfortunately, that history is quite bloody and quite brutal. Wolves have a history of persecution in this country, which of course comes as a shock to probably no one, but they have been killed for centuries. We noticed an increase in killing a few hundred years ago as European settlers arrived. They were coming to the quote New World with ideas that wolves were dangerous and scary. They began killing wolves out of fear, but also out of threat of competition for native prey sources and concern for their domestic farmed animals as well. And we also saw the development of bounties in which individuals could receive money for turning in a dead wolf. And we also eventually saw the shift of settlers moving west. Kind of drawn by manifest destiny, the idea of claiming land for their own. And unfortunately, that sense of entitlement, of thinking as the land as belonging to them, they also thought the animals belonged to them as well. And so we saw predators slaughtered, hundreds of thousands. And for many, I think we like to think that this pattern, this past of ours is gone, that we've moved to a much more I think coexistence mindset when it comes to native predators on the landscape. But unfortunately, we see that predation of wolves in terms of hunting them still happens today. There's still a lot of anti-wolf sentiment. And we also see this reflected in policies as well. So with gray wolves recently being delisted across the lower 48 states, their recovery is now in the hands of state agencies. And we do see many state agencies that are, unfortunately, trying to bring back some of the things we thought were left in the past. Montana, for example, is currently trying to push through a reimbursement bill that would provide money for trappers to reimburse them for costs used to kill wolves. And if that doesn't sound like a bounty, I don't know what does. But knowing this, knowing that wolves have faced many challenges in their growth and recovery, we do have a growing population of wolves in the United States. This map in front of you illustrates where gray wolves and red wolves are found. Today's presentation will focus really on gray wolves, but you will see that there are only 10 red wolves known to remain in the wild in North Carolina. But our gray wolf populations are concentrated primarily in Western states. And that is where we also see a lot of agriculture, livestock grazing, and so the two do come into conflict. Both of these industries, so wildlife conservation and livestock, are actually overseen by the same federal agencies. So many of us are familiar with the U.S. Department of the Interior, and the Department of the Interior oversees the Bureau of Land Management, the Fish and Wildlife Service, and the National Park Service. And so I think many of us are familiar with what these agencies entail, especially the Fish and Wildlife Service, which oversees endangered species and plant recovery across the United States. And they are also one of the primary components or kind of stakeholders in Mexican gray wolf recovery as well. But some of us are unaware that the U.S. Department of Agriculture also plays a significant role in the recovery of wolves, wildlife, and just their health and well-being across the wild places where they're found. The Department of Agriculture oversees the Forest Service, and many wolves reside on Forest Service lands. Mexican gray wolves, for example, are found in the Gila National Forest, the Apache Sitgreaves National Forest. And so we do see a lot of collaboration between many of these agencies. We do also see another agency come into play that's a lesser known, very secretive agency under the Department of Agriculture, and it is Wildlife Services. And Wildlife Services is essentially a predator control agency. Last year, for example, in 2020, Wildlife Services killed over 300 wolves to benefit the livestock industry. These were gray wolves. I believe it was 381. And they actually killed 5 endangered Mexican gray wolves as well. So unfortunately, even though we might assume that the Fish and Wildlife Service is the only agency impacting wolf recovery, we see that all of these organizations or agencies do have an impact on wolf recovery, because many of them, like the Bureau of Land Management, the Forest Service, also allow for grazing of livestock on their federal public lands. And that negatively impacts wolves and other wildlife and ecosystem health as well. So primarily we are focused on public lands grazing. Public lands grazing is the leasing of federal lands for grazing purposes. And we see this again primarily in the Bureau of Land Management, or BLM, and the Forest Service, although other federal agencies will allow grazing on public lands as well. Most of this is concentrated on Forest Service or BLM land. Public lands grazing is one of the most widespread causes of species endangerment in the West. Public lands grazing destroys vegetation, damages wildlife habitat, can contaminate waterways with fecal waste, can displace native prey, therefore making it harder for native predators to find their preferred prey sources. They can destroy riparian areas. So the challenges we must kind of deal with and counteract because of public lands grazing are numerous. You might be wondering if we are experiencing all of these challenges and setbacks because of grazing. Certainly we must be at least making a profit off of it. The public must be benefiting in some way. But federal grazing is actually very cheap. The federal grazing fee is currently $1.35 per animal unit per month. An animal unit is defined as 1 cow and 1 calf pair, or 5 sheep or 5 goats or 1 horse. And so it would just be $1.35 per month for each of those units on your grazing parcel. For comparison, that is about 93% less than fees for grazing on private land. These grazing permits are purchased or bought through the Forest Service or the Bureau of Land Management, and they're 10-year permits, and the allotments range from a few acres to thousands of acres all across public lands. So to kind of delve a bit deeper into the development of public lands grazing, it's really important to look at how grazing itself came to be in the United States. In 1865, we really started to see a growth in livestock ranching out west, primarily due to railroads being able to easily transport cattle from the east to the west. And as ranchers were beginning to kind of stake claim and take over western lands, cattle were roaming freely. There was no real kind of fencing structure, no legal system. And this did cause some erosion, some degradation of the land. In 1891, the forest reserves were established by the Forest Reserves Act. These would later become our national forests. But in 1905, grazing permits were established, and this would allow for grazing on these forest reserve lands. We start to see problems develop in the 1910s when ranchers began to use those leased grazing permits as collateral for bank loans. And this set in motion the idea that rather than grazing on these lands as being a privilege, many took it to be a right, and a private property right at that. And we do see this mindset continue today. I'm sure many are familiar with recent cases regarding public lands grazing out west. In 1934, we did start to see some regulation with the Taylor Grazing Act, which authorized grazing districts, regulated grazing a bit more, and did also require that people applying for a permit did need to own a base property near the area in which they were applying for a permit to lease. In 1946, we see the establishment of the Bureau of Land Management, and one of the primary responsibilities of the BLM really is to oversee grazing on public lands. 1966, we see the establishment of a base value of the grazing fee at $1.23. And this grazing fee to this day is still adjusted annually, typically according to permit rates for private land, prices of beef, and costs of production. And many of you might be wondering, wow, we have a really long history of providing for ranchers and the livestock industry. But what about wildlife? Well, nearly a century after, more than a century after, we saw growth in ranching out west, we finally see some establishment of protocol for protecting endangered plants and endangered animals across the United States. And that was the establishment of the Endangered Species Act in 1973 that did grant protections to wolves, gray wolves, Mexican gray wolves, and red wolves as well, all of which were heavily needed, especially with challenges imposed by livestock. And then in 1978, there was the establishment of the Public Rangelands Improvement Act, which says the grazing fee could not fall below $1.35 per animal unit per month, and also couldn't increase by more than 25% increments each year. It is worth noting this does just apply to Forest Service and BLM lands. As mentioned earlier, other federal agencies, other departments such as the Department of Defense, do allow for grazing on public lands overseen by them, but these grazing fees do not apply to their to the lands they oversee. It's also worth noting that this grazing fee minimum of $1.35 has not changed significantly since it was established. So this chart does, or this graph, I should say, does illustrate how prices of the postage stamp, for example, have changed due to inflation. The percent change in the postage stamp is the green line on top, and you'll notice it very closely mimics the percent change in inflation. But the grazing fee has not responded to inflation and has remained quite low. A report by the Nonpartisan Congressional Research Service showed that the average monthly fee for private lands grazing was $22.60 per animal unit per month in 2017. To put that into comparison, the BLM and Forest Service grazing fee in 2017 was $1.87. We are currently back at $1.35, which is the absolute lowest by law the grazing fee can be set. Now, knowing kind of this quick background, and I do highly recommend anyone who's very interested dig further into this. We also can make the sources we used in this program available if anyone were to reach out to us via email. We'd be happy to share those after as well. But it's very important to illustrate how wolves and livestock overlap, especially on these public lands. So this map illustrates roughly where gray wolves live in the West today, and keeping this black outlining the gray area, and we're going to get rid of the gray area. We'll see where gray wolf territory overlaps with public lands in the West. And you're probably thinking, what a great source of wolf habitat, which is true. It really is a great area for wolves to live, and it suits their needs very nicely. But looking at this map, we're now going to see exactly where livestock grazing occurs on public lands in the West. And you'll notice that green area pretty much encompasses almost all of the public lands. So that we have out West, BLM land, Forest Service land, some national wildlife refuges are out there as well. And this, of course, has extremely negative impacts on wolves and their recovery. Livestock grazing occurs on about 270 million acres of federal lands. Of BLM lands, 90% are leased for grazing. 69% of Forest Service lands outside of Alaska are leased for grazing. And there is a cost, of course, associated with this that is really borne by the American public. Public lands grazing can cost taxpayers anywhere from $500 million to $1 billion annually in direct and indirect costs. Now, we might be thinking, okay, I'm paying taxes, we pay taxes every single year. We don't always get a say in where those taxes go. But it is also worth noting that there are other costs borne by public lands grazing. And while they might not impact us financially, they do impact us because they directly impact animals we care about, particularly Mexican gray wolves. Now, virtually all wolves, all gray wolves living across the United States are impacted by the livestock industry in some way. But Mexican gray wolves, this very endangered, very small population, growing in size, but still facing challenges in the Southwest, is impacted significantly. So for anyone who might be unfamiliar with Mexican gray wolves, we do have a Mexican gray wolf on the right side of the screen. His name is Lighthawk, and he does live here at the Wolf Conservation Center. We'll discuss his story in a few moments. But he is a really great representative of the Mexican gray wolf species. They were listed as endangered in the 1970s, and their primary cause of endangerment was loss of habitat, predator control programs, and extensive poisoning sponsored by the federal government. And these combined to lead to their extinction in the United States. The Mexican gray wolf population did begin to make a bit of a recovery because a recovery program was established, which also called for a captive breeding component known as a species survival plan. And today, there are species survival plan facilities for Mexican gray wolves all across the US and in Mexico as well. We do work with the Mexican government in a binational recovery effort. And the goal of this captive breeding program is, of course, to release these wolves back into the wild, to allow them not only to perform valuable environmental and ecological services, but to give them the chance to be wild wolves, to roam where they want to roam, to not have to see fences. And it really is the greatest gift we can give to a captive animal. The captive-born release program really began in 1998 with the release of Mexican gray wolves into what was then referred to as the Blue Range Recovery Area in Arizona and New Mexico. For anyone who's been following our website, you will be familiar with this story because we're actually celebrating the 23rd year of wild Mexican gray wolves. The anniversary of the first release is on Monday. So happy early Lobo Week to anyone who is very excited to celebrate Mexican gray wolves. The current US wild population is approximately 186 wolves. The count was just released a few weeks ago, but they do face challenges. Yes, their population is growing and has grown the last few years, but we also see illegal killings, poaching, but also technically legal killings by the federal government of Mexican gray wolves to appease the livestock industry. This is just a quick map showing where Mexican gray wolves primarily live in the Southwest. They are found in what is known as Wolf Management Zone 1, made up of a really great swath of public lands, the Gila National Forest, the Apache Sitgreaves National Forest. But unfortunately, these areas are also shared with livestock. So this photo is a really great image taken by a wonderful wolf advocate in the Southwest. And you'll see a wildlife habitat area sign, and right next to it, you'll see some livestock. And so it does beg the question, if these areas are so great for wolves, can they really be that great for domestic farmed animals? And the answer is no, they're not. In fact, many adjustments need to be made to these areas to provide for the livestock that are being grazed there. This picture on the bottom is a Forest Service image of a cattle guard being installed in a national forest to prevent the cattle from straying. Now, we see that with Mexican gray wolves and livestock, we do see a lot of efforts to coexist, which is great. Coexistence is, of course, important to recovery of all species. But we do tend to see with Mexican gray wolves, eventually, after several other efforts are exhausted, we do eventually tend to see that rather than moving cows off of public lands to protect the wolves, we unfortunately see that wolves are removed to protect the cows. The Fish and Wildlife Service does view wild removals as a last-ditch effort to prevent conflict. Typically, non-lethal methods of keeping wolves away from livestock are used first, and the Fish and Wildlife Service will make several attempts to work with ranchers in the community. And I should also mention, it isn't just the Fish and Wildlife Service. This is a collaborative effort comprised of the state agencies out west and various other federal agencies and tribes as well. So they all comprise the Mexican Wolf Interagency Field Team. But unfortunately, we do always see that Mexican gray wolves usually bear the brunt of the cost. The service's website does have this statement that is italicized. stating it is the service's intent to recover the Mexican wolf in a manner that reduces economic effects on stakeholders and the local livestock industry. And I think this statement is a bit of a wake-up call to really emphasize the fact that while the Fish and Wildlife Service is tasked with recovering this endangered animal and really restoring the health of these ecosystems, we unfortunately see that sometimes they are heavily influenced by the local livestock industry as well. With these wild releases, wolves are either captured and moved to captivity, but unfortunately they are also potentially killed as well. The Wolf Conservation Center does have a direct line to these removal efforts. Mexican gray wolf lighthawk, who we met a few slides ago, was actually a wild-born wolf. He was born in Arizona in 2015, but as he grew up, he began spending time with a female, as of course we hope wolves do, to repopulate and grow the population. And they were spotted several times near livestock and getting into what some might say is some trouble. But the Fish and Wildlife Service eventually issued a removal order, either for Lighthawk, who was an unidentified male at that point, or the female he was traveling with. And whichever one was captured first would be relocated to captivity. So Lighthawk was removed from the wild in 2016. He came to live at our center, where he has been for the last few years. He has a wonderful life here, very spacious, wooded enclosure. He has a family, both a mate and children, but something was taken from him. He will never be able to live in the wild ever again. And that is the ultimate goal of the program, to release these wolves into the wild. And it's devastating to think that a wolf who was wild born, who should have never known what it's like to live in captivity, now has to live here for the remainder of his life. So it is just quite a challenge to deal with. We do also see poaching of Mexican gray wolves, and recent studies suggest that periods of liberalized wolf killing on behalf of the government, so for example, with the Fish and Wildlife Service and Wildlife Services removing Mexican gray wolves from the wild, either lethally or to captivity, can actually result in an increase in poaching, because it sends a message that maybe these wolves aren't as valuable as we thought, but also perhaps that maybe poachers won't be punished quite as strongly. A particular case made headlines a few years ago. Some of you might be familiar with it. A very young Mexican gray wolf was discovered in the Gila National Forest. He had been trapped and beaten by a rancher in 2015. The rancher, Craig Thiessen, had actually beaten the wolf with a shovel and broken its jaw. The rancher did deny killing the wolf, but in his period grazing cattle on a Forest Service allotment in the Gila National Forest, this rancher received about $300,000 in taxpayer-funded subsidies. His punishment initially was $2,300 of a fine and 1 year of probation. However, and this is where many of you came in, so thank you, various conservation organizations all across the country encourage their supporters to contact the Forest Service, asking them to revoke his grazing permit, because this sets a horrible precedent. Not only did he violate his agreement with the Forest Service, but he also violated the Endangered Species Act, and we did succeed. The Forest Service did revoke his grazing permit, and actually just a few days ago, his appeal, trying to claim this area as kind of private property rights, his appeal was denied as well. So this does set a good precedent, but it also does highlight the consistent challenges Mexican wolves can face, not only in terms of being removed for potentially interacting with livestock, but also there can be this sense of hatred and animosity towards Mexican gray wolves. And just to quickly summarize, I think it's important as we discuss how cattle can be very destructive for the landscape, and why they shouldn't be on national forest lands. I think it's very important to highlight why wolves should be there and why we should push for wolf recovery. Wolves are a keystone species, meaning they have huge impacts on everything in an ecosystem, whether it's through direct or indirect effects. They can also provide food for other animals by basically providing leftovers. Scavengers can typically enjoy a meal or two from a wolf kill. We also know that wolves can lower the spread of disease. This is especially important as chronic wasting disease is spreading across the western states. Wolves could potentially help mitigate the spread of this neurological illness. And then we also see that plants and plant life will benefit from wolves as well. So these are just really some quick points. But of course, there's more information on our website for those interested in learning more about ecological impacts of wolves. Now, of course, it would be quite silly of us to give this program and then not highlight methods of coexistence, because there are efforts being made to promote coexistence with wolves and livestock. However, coexistence should not come at the expense of wolves being removed from the wild. We know there are non-lethal methods of keeping wolves from livestock, such as fladry, displayed on the screen, but also through range riding, guardian dogs. There are a lot of ways to deter wolves from cattle or from sheep or other domestic farmed animals. There's also the Mexican Wolf Payment for Presence program, in which livestock owners are paid to, or if they're grazing their livestock in areas that have Mexican gray wolves, they can receive a stipend essentially for grazing their livestock in these areas. There are also reimbursement programs. If any rancher has a verified, confirmed wolf kill of their cattle, they will receive reimbursement for that. These programs can certainly go a long way in promoting coexistence. There are studies, though, that suggest that these programs don't essentially buy tolerance. There are still some cases where individuals receive funds but are still not supportive of Mexican wolves on the landscape. So really, in terms of promoting coexistence, we should be halting all removals of Mexican gray wolves from the wild, because as we know, this can indicate that they're no longer valuable and it can encourage poaching. But we should also require carcass removal to prevent wolves from becoming accustomed to beef that is on the landscape. So if these animals are being grazed across a very large area of land and they die from pretty much anything, wolves are definitely not the leading cause of death for cattle. It can be a respiratory illness, natural occurrences. They are grazing, on a national forest. It is the wild. But if a carcass is left for a few days before a rancher is aware of the death or before they can move it, that carcass will be scavenged, and it could eventually encourage wolves to become accustomed to this beef and this easy food source. So really a simple way to foster coexistence could be just removing these carcasses from the landscape if we're not going in the complete direction just yet of moving the livestock themselves. And of course, there are ways that you can make a difference as well. I know sometimes we can feel very powerless, especially if we don't live in areas where this is occurring. So if we're not living in the Southwest, but you can certainly help by raising awareness, speak up about Mexican gray wolves and the challenges they face, but wolves in other states as well, such as Washington, Montana, Wyoming. Wolves do face challenges in terms of encountering livestock ranchers. And so it really is important to show your support, to show why you think it's important that wolves are protected. You can also oppose measures that would threaten native wildlife, support the Endangered Species Act, and you can teach your friends and family about the impact of animal agriculture on wolves. You can also work to expand your knowledge. Maybe think of some small, simple changes you can make in your daily life that not only would protect wolves, but could also ensure the protection of all animals and other species as well. So we are in a very unique position to be quite powerful in our daily actions. And I do have a QR code. If anyone would like to visit our Save the Wolves page, you can scan that QR code with the camera on your smartphone, and that will take you to our website. But we can also steer you in that direction if anyone were to reach out in the chat as well. I'm sure Dana could put that in the link, or put that link in the chat box. But with that, we are going to segue into part 2 with our friends at Catskill Animal Sanctuary. I should note that if you do have any questions, there will be a designated question and answer portion at the end of the program. And so we can certainly kind of delve into questions then, or over email as well if we don't have the chance to get to your questions. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing this PowerPoint, and Dana is going to transition us over to Catskill Animal Sanctuary.
Thank you so much for that fascinating information, Regan. I am now going to switch us over to our friends at Catskill Animal Sanctuary to learn more about and hopefully meet some of the rescued farmed animals in their care.
And there we are.
Hello. Thank you so much, Regan. That was a great presentation. Oops, so sorry. we have something going on in the background here. We are about to say hello to some of our sheep here.
Did everyone just leave you?
We did just lose everyone 1 second here. So Catskill Animal Sanctuary, while Lauren goes and collects some sheep for us, Catskill Animal Sanctuary has been rescuing farmed animals for about 20 years now. We're actually celebrating our 20th anniversary here of animal rescue. We have saved over 5,000 chickens, ducks, geese, sheep, cows, pigs from situations of neglect and abuse. And we've brought them here to live with us in safety on a 150-acre refuge in the Hudson Valley in Saugerties, New York. And while most of our animals, they will live out their lives here at Sanctuary into their old age. We do a few adoptions, but for the most part, they are spending the remainder of their years here. So right now we've got about 200 animals who are calling the sanctuary home. And we recognize that, and we've got some sheep coming back, I think. We've got a few sheep coming back here. So hopefully we'll get a hello from Atticus. Can I get some, ready? Go! Ready? You might need to toss them off. Yeah, here we go.
There we go. Good boy.
So we've got Stewie back. Hello, bud. You want to give those all? Come on, Atticus. Hold on. We've gotten a few friends back, and hopefully the loud noise will stay quiet. Lauren, do you want to actually go and check that out? But we have, so we have been fortunate to make the world of difference to these 5,000 animals, but we do recognize that it is a very small number in comparison to the 10 billion land animals who are raised for food each year in the United States. And we're talking today about sheep and cows who, although they are among some of the least likely to, or some of the fewest in number of land animals who are raised for food each year in the U.S. They do have a disproportionate impact on the environment and of course on wolf recovery as well, because these are two species who, unlike so many farm animals, are actually getting to live any portion of their lives outdoors. 95 to 98% of all farmed animals in the US will spend the entirety of their lives in confinement indoors. And so when we have hundreds of millions of cows and sheep grazing primarily out west, often in lands that should be wolf habitats, we are running into conflicts between farmers and wildlife. Atticus here is very, very happy. I'm hoping that we are going to be able to say hello to someone who is representative of so many of the sheep who are raised, on farms in the US, because although we don't often think of sheep and cows as being, we don't often think of sheep as being eaten much in the US, with the exception of as lambs. There are still all of the sheep who are raised for their wool. Those farms are also raising the lambs who are ultimately sold and killed to be eaten in the US. So we've got Atticus. Lauren's not able to. Lauren hasn't been able to get us any of the other sheep to come.
Everyone
back
else is
around.
over on the other side of the barn.
But
That means all the cookies for Atticus.
yeah, so we're gonna have to go with Atticus as my example of who these sheep are. So sheep, when they are living on farms, the majority of their lives are spent outdoors without much shelter. Farmers may have give birth to their lambs in confinement and stay in barns for the early days or weeks of those lambs' lives before the lambs are often sent off to be killed and sold for profit. But the majority of them are indeed living outside. And so this is where they are likely to fall prey to wild predators in part, but also any level of weather-related events or natural illnesses. So when we see discussions around the depopulation or killing of wild predators, we've had so many ginger snap cookies in here. Just hide one more cookie. See what happens here.
Atticus, I don't have any cookies.
When we see conversations around the killing of predators to protect these sheep and these cows who are living outdoors, what we're often seeing are conversations around protecting farmed animal welfare, that these wild predators are a huge animal welfare threat to sheep and to cows. And what we know is that ultimately these predators are actually one of the least likely causes of death for these farmed animals. Of course, the most likely cause would be killing them to actually eat them. But among the unwanted deaths where the animals are dying prior to when farmers want to kill them for human consumption, wolves are one of the least likely reasons that these animals are going to die. Sheep are twice as likely to die from any sort of natural weather event or illness. And they are actually, sheep are 19 times more likely to be killed by a domestic dog than by any wolf. So even among predator attacks, wolves are usually not the culprit. Cows are 13 times as likely to die of some sort of natural illness or weather event. The sheep are coming
Everyone's
back.
coming back. And by the way, in the background, you can hear Lola the duck. That is the duck who you hear in the background. And
did we have somebody notice it?
Someone noticed the duck, yes. And oh my goodness, is this who we were looking for, Kaden?
To talk about. Thank goodness. Now we're back on track.
That's what happens when you work with animals, right?
I'm getting the good spot on her back, so she's doing her little happy wiggle dance here, where they will smack their lips. So Nina here, she is someone who most likely was born on a farm in upstate New York. She may have been born on a farm somewhere in the Northeast. So her story is a little bit different than the average sheep in the United States. But Nina here ultimately was sold as a lamb and was sold to a live market. So she was rescued from one of over 80 live markets located in New York City. So these are also sometimes called wet markets. And we often hear about them existing in other countries, but they are actually quite common in the United States as well. Hi, Nina. And Nina was rescued 2 years ago, almost exactly. She was rescued on Easter of 2019 by a couple who wanted to celebrate Easter, not by eating a lamb, but by sparing the life of one. So they went into this live market and they asked the owner to release Nina to them.
And for whatever reason, he agreed. And with Nina, he offered this couple who was rescuing her, he offered them some rope to bind all 4 of her legs together for transport, because this is such a common method of moving lambs around. They declined and said that she would ride in the backseat of their car like a dog, right? Very good. And so she came to live here at Sanctuary. She was a tiny little thing. She could fit through a chicken door to get into the barn, the chicken barn where she was quarantining when she first arrived.
Atticus looks sad that there's no more cookies for him.
He's going to be sitting quite happily after eating all of those ginger snaps. But Nina had to quarantine when she first got here at Sanctuary because she was sick with a very contagious virus. And so we didn't want her to share it with the rest of our sheep herd. Now, keep in mind, Nina was a 2 to 4 month old lamb when she was rescued. She was going to be killed to be eaten. And she most likely was born on a wool farm. Wool farms and sheep farms in general, they make their money from a combination of selling adult sheep's wool, primarily female sheep, and then often selling the lambs for profit. Some female lambs and almost all of the male lambs are sent to be killed and eaten. So there's a combination of wool farming, lamb farming. And it is extremely common for them to be sent quite a long distance to be killed. And these are difficult transports for them. But Nina is a very, very lucky sheep here. She is going to spend a good 20 years here at Sanctuary in a rich family flock. And had she been living on a sheep farm, she would have been looking at folks who are lobbying to encourage allowing the killing of wildlife, specifically wild predators, wolves included, in order to protect her welfare. But what we see on Nina's body here are some other marks of something that was done in the name of animal welfare, but things that were done to Nina when she was a couple-day-old lamb. And so when we look at Nina's face, she's kind of the quintessential picture. Is she entirely in the camera, Lauren?
She is. She's just very close.
Can we
so it's
see
kind
her? Can we see the top of her face?
There it is. Okay. With her giant ears.
She's got a great face altogether. She's sort of the quintessential picture of what we expect a sheep to look like. Quite woolly, normal face shape. If we look at her in comparison to a few of our others, can we scan our camera over
yes.
and see if we can spot Davy or one of the others in the background? Where is Davy hanging out?
He's behind the tree. He's playing hide and seek. This is Davy behind the tree over there.
Are we able to see any of the sheep who have horns?
Nope.
Okay, great.
Nope.
But we are able to see, can you point out a few sheep tails for us there, Lauren?
Sheep tails. I see some cute little sheep bums. Actually, I have to move. Oh, hi, Nina.
Nina.
She's in the way, though.
I know. Well, we'll get her to move out of the way.
Oh, we can see her beautiful arms.
Nina.
There we go. I'm gonna move this over. So we see the rest of Nina's herd who is hanging out over here. So let's see. Now can we see? No, we still can't really see anyone with horns, but that's okay. But we can see some bums. So like this bum here belongs to Seneca. She's got a nice little tail there. This bum here belongs to Micah, and he's got a little tail there too. And Stuart is staring at us. He's the one in the middle there. Hi, Stuart.
So when we are talking about something that was done to Nina when she was very, very young, she should have been growing in her horns as well, but she would have had the little buds that were just starting to come in as soon as she was born. She would have had those most likely burned off. They may have been cut a little bit down the line, but it is not natural for her to not have horns. And she would have also had her nice, beautiful, long lamb tail cut off when she was just a couple of days old. And there are two different reasons that we do we see farmers doing each of these. The horns is to prevent them when they are in close contact with humans from injuring humans, and when they are in close contact with large herds from injuring one another. And if they injure one another, those injuries will often go unnoticed by farmers because they are existing in such large herds. There's a very low and a very high, there are very few caregivers or farmers per sheep. So nobody is getting regularly checked over. And those injuries can go septic and cause loss of life. When we are talking about their tails being removed, it is so that there's no poop that builds up in their tails, in the wool around their tails, because they do have this really thick, bred to grow quite a lot of hair. And so in order to prevent poo from accumulating there, they will cut off the tail and reduce the amount of wool and covering that is over their butts. And the reason they want to avoid having this accumulation is because flies are drawn to their poop. And we see something that is super, super common, and a very, very common loss of life on sheep farms, something called fly strike, where these flies will lay their eggs, will lay their eggs in their skin. And these fly strike events can cause a sheep to get a systemic infection and for them to lose their lives. Here at Sanctuary, we never, if somebody is born here to somebody who is rescued pregnant, we will never dehorn them or take off their tails. They will get to exist in their full and beautiful form. Scout was rescued without her horns, but she was rescued with a tail. So she's very fortunate. I have some of your wool in my mouth. There you go.
And by the way, real quick, I saw someone in the chat mention that they hear baby chicks. Those would not be like chickens or anyone who are born here, because as a sanctuary, we don't breed the animals. What you're hearing are the wonderful sounds of spring. There's a whole bunch of wild birds and some trees over there, and it's just fantastic to hear them. And by the way, who's this that just showed up?
This is, oh, are you showing Stewie or are you showing Scout? Okay.
This one.
Stewie. Stewie is one of our goofballs here. Just a total sweetheart. Nina can't handle the attention not being on her butt. Maybe we could scan away from that. Here at Sanctuary, we don't have to worry about fly strike being a common cost or being a common event. We certainly don't have to worry about it costing our sheep their lives, because we'll address it by simply doing butt checks in fly season, making sure everyone eats clean, cleaning them up if they're dirty, and then also catching anything that does happen, any injury that may happen, because life happens. Anyone who has kids knows that you don't have to be doing anything wrong. They'll still find a way to occasionally get a cut or a scratch. We'll treat that. We'll treat it that same way we would do any first aid on ourselves. So we're not losing them to these very avoidable deaths. And instead, what we're seeing is farming says it's animal welfare to these very, very painful bodily mutilations, cutting off horns, which have nerve endings, bone tissue, blood tissue, cutting off tails, which are a part of their spine, as a way of protecting animal welfare. Yeah, you're very much in the way.
Nina likes to just get in front of the camera all the time.
This is unfortunately super avoidable, and it is so common for something like the killing of wild animals, like wolves, and like the modifications of farmed animals' bodies to be excused as being in the name of those animals who are actually suffering from some of the choices that we're making around them. Can we actually see anything other than Nina's side here?
Nina has to work on her blocking on the camera.
She's not great. She's not great about her overall camera angles here. But she is absolutely a love bug in terms of stealing attention. We are fortunate enough to be living in a time where we are so able to live healthily and happily. We're able to get complete nutrition accessibly and sustainably from plants. we don't actually have to be eating sheep or cows or any of the farmed animals who are raised for food each year. We can still look out for our human health and our environment by choosing veganism, by choosing to eat more plant-based meals. And this can actually benefit the environment in a whole host of ways, including, but we've got Lena.
Lena and
Lena's
Luna.
gonna come on over.
Oh, Lena wanted to come say hi to me. I'm sorry, Kaden.
Are we gonna flip her?
Lena, what? Oh, maybe she did. Maybe she didn't. Oh,
Lena's
no.
on her way over to follow a few of our other herd members. Can we see Tucker over there? We're gonna see if we can say hello very quickly to one of our bovine friends.
He's over there.
He is too far away.
He's a little bit far away because we are running down on time. The time goes so quickly.
Yes. So we are so grateful to get to know these sheep who are now saying goodbye to us on a very, very individual level. It is so rare for us to get to form these deep bonds with farmed animals. And we find that they're such wonderful advocates for themselves, for their own species. And they absolutely show that they want us, that they show us that they want to live these lives out in full, where they can express their individuality, where they can live in natural herds, in natural environments, but in also safety. And we do not, we're gonna actually be able to see someone who looks like what a sheep should look like. Very quickly, we're gonna turn and say hello to Susie.
Whoop. Hi, Susie. She does have places to be though, so she's not gonna stop and say hello. She's got to go catch up with her friends who all went that direction. Yep. Oh, and actually here comes her sister. So yeah, they're gonna go catch up with their friends. Sheep love to hang out with their friends and family, so off she goes.
And next is gonna be Davy. I think he's gonna come around the bend. We can.
He's the one playing hide and seek behind the tree there.
We'll see what happens.
And he's emerged. And then of course our buddy Atticus, who was hanging out with us, is this other guy over here.
So we are gonna pass it over to we're gonna pass it back over to Regan. But just in summary, we are absolutely, unfortunately, seeing a lot of the choices that we are making around farmed animals really being driven by overall profit rather than looking out necessarily for these actual farmed animals themselves who are undergoing quite a lot of really, really painful things on farms. And this is also impacting heavily choices that we are making around how we are sculpting and changing the natural environment in the United States and around the world, and is ultimately negatively impacting our environment and other animals in it. And we don't have to make these choices anymore. We are fortunate to have an abundance of choices. Yeah, we're going to pass it back over to Regan.
All right, thank you so much everyone for coming. And pass it over.
Thank you, Kaden and Lauren, for that wonderful introduction to some of the sanctuary's adorable residents and that very thought-provoking background information. So now I'm going to be switching back over to Regan, who has moved up to the wolf enclosures since we saw her last. She will be providing background information on the Wolf Conservation Center's mission and introducing us to 3 ambassador gray wolves.
Great, thanks so much, Dana, and thank you to Caden and Lauren and all of those wonderful critters at Catskill for really introducing us to the importance of animal welfare and protecting really all living beings. It's really inspirational and should really motivate all of us to do the best we can in our everyday lives. So I am here with, I think, really the most exciting part of the Wolf Conservation Center, or one of the most exciting parts. our 3 ambassador gray wolves. So as I mentioned earlier, the Wolf Conservation Center really strives to protect and preserve wolves all across North America through education, participation into recovery programs, and advocacy efforts. But for a lot of people, if they're not actually seeing a wolf in person, there can often be a bit of a gap. It can be very hard to care about something we don't always see. And with our ambassador gray wolves who live here on site and are really the most important members of our education team, they help bridge that gap. They help connect people, whether it's on-site, off-site, virtual, to the whole wide world of wild wolves. So through these ambassadors, we hope you can envision their wild counterparts living out west in states like Montana, Wyoming, Idaho, the Pacific Northwest, even Mexican gray wolves down in Arizona, New Mexico, and northern Mexico. So if you guys come with me up this way just a bit, we have our 3 ambassador wolves that live here. And one of our wolves is posing quite beautifully back on that rock. That is ambassador wolf Alewa, and she is a gray wolf. So gray wolves are the most common type or species of wolf in the world. And Alewa is a really great representative of that species. She is a little toasty today. As many of you are aware, while we're loving this spring weather, breaking out our t-shirts, the wolves have a bit of catching up to do. They are currently going through a bit of a shedding process. The onset of longer days brings about a corresponding hormonal shift in these wolves. And so they will start to lose their insulating winter undercoat, but it hasn't fully kicked in just yet. So they are prepared for a bit cooler weather than we're having today. But you'll notice Alewa is keeping herself cool by staying in the shade. She's panting a bit, and she's doing the best she can to not get totally bogged down by this warmer weather. Alewa does live with her 2 brothers, and together these wolves make up our trio of ambassador wolves. And her 2 brothers, her younger brother Nakai, who you'll see moving across the enclosure towards Alewa, he is 6 years old, turning 7 in actually just a few weeks. Wolves are born in the spring, so usually April and May. And with these ambassador wolves, Nakai was born on April 13th. Alewa and her brother Zephyr were both born on April 20th. And so everyone will be experiencing a birthday this spring, which is very exciting and a lot of reason to celebrate. But their birthdays also, of course, correspond with wild births as well. And so through these ambassador wolves celebrating their birthdays, we can also discuss what birthdays could mean for wolves in the wild. Most excitingly, for red wolves and Mexican gray wolves, the birth of wild-born pups could potentially mean a cross foster, which is when captive-born wolves, so Mexican gray wolves, for example, that are born at a center like ours, if their birth date aligns with the birth of wolves in the wild, they could potentially get the opportunity to leave their natal family in captivity and go live in the wild and be adopted and raised as wild wolves, which is really everything we would hope for any wolf born in captivity. As a note, the Wolf Conservation Center is quite fortunate to have participated in a cross foster a few years ago. One of our Mexican gray wolves, born to Mexican gray wolf Lighthawk, our wolf who was removed from the wild in 2016, he and his mate Trumpet actually gave birth to a litter of pups in 2019. And the only female that survived in that litter, a very lucky lady named Hope, was actually flown across the country before she was 2 weeks old and placed into the den of the Saffel pack. Unfortunately, the Saffel pack is no longer designated as an actual pack in the Southwest due to a span of illegal killings and removals of the family by federal agencies. But we are hopeful that Hope and her brothers are still out there traveling in the wild, but just no longer meeting the definition of a wild pack because there's no breeding pair in that family. But if you look around this enclosure here, you'll notice it's quite spacious. We try everything we can to make this enclosure feel as though it's wild. So these wolves can feel as though they are really living their best possible life. They've known nothing but this organization. These wolves are captive born, and there's no release component for any wolves such as this. So they will spend their entire life here, and we endeavor every day to make sure they feel as loved and appreciated as we know they are across the world. One way we can make them feel extra appreciated, especially on a hot day like today, is of course give them some snacks. These wolves are given snacks during all of our programs, and today they are going to get some venison. It was actually donated to us. It's a really wonderful way to feed our wolves. We feed all of our wolves here a whole diet. So they're eating either a whole carcass for our red wolves and Mexican gray wolves. We will collect roadkill from the surrounding streets. People call us, we go pick it up. It's a great way to engage with the local community, but also make sure we're giving our wolves the food they need to fuel their bodies, create some really nice, healthy gut microbiomes, teach really important social skills and development to those pups as they're growing older. But also, in the event that these wolves are released into the wild, they're eating the exact wild food they can safely find and consume in the wild. So we feed all of our red wolves and Mexican gray wolves that whole carcass deer. And with our ambassador wolves here, today they are getting some lucky leftovers. They're getting some really nice venison. Now, these wolves are very relaxed right now, but that's going to change. I'm going to pick up their snack bucket. I'm going to put a glove on. And wolves are so highly intelligent, they know exactly what that means. So watch and see how their behavior changes. Even just as they notice I'm reaching into my pocket, I'm grabbing a glove, and it's going to be a full-on celebration for these wolves. So you'll notice tails up, extra excitement, some jumping, some moving around. These guys are really looking forward to these snacks. And it's a really great way to thank them for that work they do to teach people about wolves. And again, it's also a really fun spring treat for them. Who doesn't want a nice snack on a day like today? And as an extra bonus, some of the pieces are still slightly cold. So it's a nice crunchy snack, kind of like a bit of a meat popsicle for these guys, which is everything they would hope for. Some nice jumps. These wolves really speak to the athletic ability of wolves, those strong, powerful legs, that really great sense of smell, nice kind of mouth-eye coordination when it comes to catching those snacks. And these guys, this really is just a snack. So this is not meant to be a large meal. You might notice one or two wolves are out competing, another wolf or two. Everyone's going to get larger meals later. So we're not too concerned about any wolves missing out. Now, these wolves, as I mentioned, they're here as representatives. We have 36 other wolves that live on site, but those wolves are very elusive, very shy. And that's actually really great. It's a way to kind of speak to the true elusive nature of wolves in the wild, wanting to stay far away from people, not wanting to go too close to human settlements. And it also means that if we were told that adult releases of Mexican gray wolves were going to resume in the United States, we could recommend some of our Mexican gray wolves for release into the wild. There's also the potential chance that some critically endangered red wolves might be released into the wild this year. And so it's very exciting to know that our wolves, who are so shy and so elusive, could be some of the very first red wolves that might get the call back to the wild. You'll see these guys moving around, sniffing. You'll also notice some shedding going on. You'll see some tufts of undercoat sticking out on Nakai's hind legs. So Alea was going to the bathroom. But so through these wolves, we are really able to appreciate and learn so much more about wolves in the wild. You know, looking at Alewa, at her movements, at her leadership ability in this family, the way she nurtures and keeps everyone working together as a cohesive unit. We could easily picture a Mexican gray wolf mother doing the same thing in the wild, really working to ensure the safety and growth of the family, teaching other wolves in that family how to survive, how to hunt. And so we're so thankful to these wolves for the work they do. and really connecting us to Mexican gray wolves and other wild wolves as well. Now, I do want to be mindful of everyone's time, and I do want to make sure we have enough time for questions. I imagine there might be quite a bit rolling through, especially because we haven't taken questions up until this point. So Dana, if you would like me to kind of leave it here to make sure we are mindful of everyone's time, if you think now is a good time to start going into some of those questions and answers, we're happy to on this end. We can certainly keep the wolves on video. I imagine they will lay down and rest because they're going to be especially full and happy after those snacks.
Thank you, Regan, and thank you to the ambassador wolves. That was very exciting to watch. So if anyone has questions, I've made note of a few that have come in through the Q&A function. But if you have questions that you haven't yet typed out, feel free to enter them into the Q&A, and I will start reading them aloud to both Regan and Caden and Lauren at Catskill Animal Sanctuary. So to start, one that came in earlier in the program was, this one is more directed to the Wolf Conservation Center, so I'll keep you guys pinned for now. Do you work with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to release your wolves into the wild?
That's a great question. Thank you to whoever asked. Yes, wild releases are a very exciting part of wolf recovery. And they're also quite complicated. There are actually a lot of kind of hands in the game that all work together to make sure these releases happen when possible and as safely as possible for the wolves. So yes, the Fish and Wildlife Service is one of the agencies that we work with. And the Fish and Wildlife Service will also work with Arizona Game and Fish Department, New Mexico Game and Fish Department, and a few other stakeholders out there as well. White Mountain Apache Tribe. There are a lot of groups that have an important say in when wolves are released, how many wolves are released. But then we also work with advisors to determine which wolves are able to be released based on genetics. And so that's where the captive breeding program, the species survival plan, each program has a coordinator. And so the species survival plan coordinator would also be assessing the genetics of the captive population, working with advisors to determine which wolves are eligible for release as well, based on behavior, genetics, and a few other factors.
Great, thank you. So this next question, I think both organizations might be able to answer. I will direct it first to you, Regan, since we're already on your screen, and then I'll switch over and repeat it for Catskill Animal Sanctuary. The question is, with wolves being impacted by so many anthropogenic processes, such as climate change, forcing wolves to migrate, poaching, agriculture, what impact should be our top priority to help their populations stabilize?
So that's a really great question. And I think it's worth noting that when left to their own devices, wolf populations will eventually stabilize on their own. But yes, as you mentioned, it's a bit challenging because we do impact them in so many ways. I think it's worth noting that the work that is being done with both red wolf and Mexican gray wolf programs in terms of releases to the wild, we know that releases work, and the populations do grow when releases happen, but also when adequate protections are in place. And so I think just ensuring that we use our voices to speak up and contact the necessary wildlife agencies, whether it's a state or federal agency, to ensure that wolves within that particular area are protected. I think that's a really great way to make sure we are doing our best to safeguard them and safeguard their protections, especially with gray wolves losing federal protections. Now more than ever, it's important to reach out to state agencies, wildlife agencies, and make sure that they know we value wolves. Because even if we work to solve other factors that are causing their mortality, if they're not given the respect they deserve as important wildlife populations, recovery will be quite challenging.
Thank you, Regan. So I'm going to pose that question again to Catskill Animal Sanctuary because I imagine you guys have some ideas as well. So I'm switching over to you. So the question again was, kind of shortened, what impact should be our top priority to help wolf populations and wildlife populations stabilize in terms of, animal agriculture?
I mean, I think that I think that I'll stick with Regan's overall.
Trudy has something to say.
Somebody's got to make a noise.
Kaden, real quick, who's this beautiful lady?
This is Daisy, by the way.
Okay.
So I'm going to stick with Regan's overall answer for what'll be the greatest impact for wolf populations, because I'm just going to defer to your your organization's focus. But I think that what's worth pointing out here is that a lot of the impacts that animal agriculture has, it really ties into so many. Oh goodness, you gotta shake that head out. It really ties into so many other issues having to do with the environment, with workers' rights, with with animal welfare. So we know that animal agriculture, and specifically some of the cow and sheep farming, can have a tremendous impact on greenhouse gas emissions and on climate change. So it is not as though we're looking at, like, do we address climate change? Do we address what we're doing in encroaching on wild environments? There are so many intersecting pieces here that are touching animal agriculture. And so while we absolutely recommend that folks reach out and get involved in issues around, oh my goodness, hold on, we've got Abram meeting Daisy over there.
Saying a little hello.
Reaching out to your local representatives if there are issues in your state that have to do with wolf conservation, if there are issues in your state that have to do with lessening restrictions on animal welfare in animal agriculture, any number of things, that is so important to be involved where you are. And what we can all do, that's, a fairly simple thing, is we can make the choice to make to eat more plant-based meals, and that's such an easy way of weaving it into our lives without necessarily having to just while continuing to do every other action that we can.
Thank you, Kaden. And actually, this is perfect because we do have Abram on screen. There was a kind of in-depth discussion in the chat about whether shearing sheep is humane. And I believe you did touch on it earlier, but could you just reiterate that a little bit, whether it would be humane to shear sheep?
So we have to shear most of our sheep here because we don't have we don't have another way of giving them a haircut. Someone like Abram and someone like Nina, who we met earlier, they are what we now refer to as woolly sheep. They've been bred so that they do not easily lose their own hair that they're growing, which is quite unlike pretty much any other animal who has a coat and would grow a winter coat. So they can't lose their own winter coat. And in order to prevent them from getting heat stroke from wearing, with each increasing year, more and more winter coats, every May we do have to shear them. We do it as gently and as nicely as we possibly can. They won't look at us for a week sometimes. They really hate it. But this is what we've done to them through selective breeding. And so when we do shear them, what we'll do with their wool is we'll toss it in the woods for wildlife who make nests to use, just as they would collect coats of shedded hair of other wild animals to nest with. So we don't actually use the wool here for human purposes, because ultimately the reason that they needed to be at Sanctuary was because we were farming them for wool initially. There are, however, some sheep who are able to shed naturally. We have some hair sheep here who just are what sheep would have been in the wild, or closer to it. And just like our cows and our horses in the spring, they start to lose their wool, and we see it all over the fence lines.
And I will chime in super quick, since I'm the knitter of the sanctuary right now, actually. As far as where I get yarn from, I'm a big fan of getting yarn from thrift stores, because then even if it's like an acrylic yarn, it already exists. I'm not buying more acrylic yarn, which is, plastic basically. So I'm a big fan of getting anything you can from thrift stores, really. But also I'm a big fan of bamboo yarn, cotton, hemp. There's a lot of really cool stuff out there.
Thank you for that. And I imagine there are lots of other things that we can look to in thrift stores to potentially, redirect a lot of that waste. Okay, I'm going to switch back to Regan as well. So Regan, our next question is about wolves being released into the wild. So are our wild wolves released with GPS collars, or are they tagged in some way? Are they tracked to be, so we're aware of their whereabouts? And do we do the same for cross fosters?
That's a great question. So yes, wolves that are released from captivity into the wild are given tracking collars. Even wild-born wolves are attempted to be captured and collared at some point in their lives. Every year, for Mexican gray wolves, for example, the interagency field team will conduct their annual count or census, and it's a way to get a rough estimate of the number of wild wolves, but they will also collar wolves that they are able to catch. And pups that are released are given what's called a microchip. Anyone who has a dog, for example, might be familiar with a microchip. Typically, many dogs are given one by their vet. And it's basically a way to identify the animal. So for dogs, it's in case your dog gets lost and some kind soul brings it to the vet. They can scan and identify that dog as being your beloved pet and give you a call. But for cross-fostered pups, if they are captured as adult wolves, that chip could be scanned and used to identify them as that cross-fostered pup. We have had cases with cross-fostered pups surviving to adulthood and being scanned by the Fish and Wildlife Service during the annual counts and then being fitted with tracking collars. And so in that way, we do know that cross-fostering is a method of successful releases. Of course, not the only method of releases. We do also advocate for the release of family groups and bonded pairs, in which case the adult wolves would be given, again, those tracking collars.
Thank you for that. It really looks like Zephyr is enjoying his nap spot on that rock there. Do you want to maybe see if he might howl for us?
Oh, sure. So obviously, I think many of us are aware that wolves howl. It's probably their most popular sound. And what's really fascinating about wolf howls is that they all have their own unique voice, just as we all, as humans, have our own voices as well. And wolves can howl for a variety of reasons. But sometimes they enjoy howling just to howl. It's a great way to strengthen their bonds with each other, with members of their family. So I can certainly try to get Zephyr to respond. I'll back away a bit from the camera just to not harm anyone who might have headphones in. But let's see if Zephyr is feeling up to it despite the heat. So I think I'll just start talking because we know they could keep howling. But So super fortunate in that not only did Zephyr respond, but Alewa and Nakai did as well, all beautifully showing off their wonderfully unique voices. And it does remind me, since we're discussing Mexican gray wolves, and we're approaching Lobo Week, which begins tomorrow and runs through next Saturday, we are actually going to be giving away a free Mexican gray wolf howling ringtone. We have a Mexican gray wolf even howling right now in the background. If there was ever a time to be interrupted or an animal by whom to be interrupted, I'm glad it's wolves. But on Tuesday, we will actually be giving all individuals who donate to our matching day for Mexican gray wolves. All individuals who donate will receive a free downloadable ringtone of Mexican gray wolf Aleño and his beautiful howl. So if you liked hearing these wolves howl, imagine how great it would be to have a Mexican gray wolf letting you know next time your phone is ringing. So something fun to keep in mind for anyone who is particularly drawn to howls.
Thank you for that information, Regan, and that was so exciting to hear the wolves howl. I think the sound cut out a little bit because of the wind, but it sounds like a lot of our listeners still got to really get a good portion of their howls. So that was very exciting. So there aren't very many other questions, and I believe we're kind of at time, and I do want to be respectful of everyone's time here. So I'm going to switch back very quickly to Catskill Animal Sanctuary to do one last goodbye. It looks like we do have a nice visitor here. And then Regan will switch back to you to say goodbye as well.
Thank you so much for joining us today. We are so grateful to be paired up with the Wolf Conservation Center, and Daisy is enjoying her afternoon. We will be sharing after the event where you will be able to join one of our virtual classes here at the sanctuary for free as a part of the event. So we would encourage you to check it out. We do a bunch of virtual programming to help people along their journeys, supporting farmed animals, and we hope to see you there. Is there anything else you want to add, Lauren?
Well, if people want to see more of Caden and Lauren live from Catskill Animal Sanctuary, they can do that on Tuesdays at 1 p.m. Eastern time. We go live on our Facebook page, so you can check out, we hang out with different animals at different times. So you can check in with some of the other wonderful beings who call the sanctuary home.
And I highly recommend that. I love their virtual sanctuaries, and I recommend that everyone follows them on social media and tunes in. It's a really great experience. So Regan, I'm switching back to you, and then we will say goodbye to everyone.
Great, thanks Dana, and thank you to Caden and Lauren for joining us today, and thank you to everyone for joining us today. Hopefully we've all become inspired in some way to continue to speak out for wolves and animals everywhere, whether it's through some change we make in our daily life, or even just reaching out to a representative or a wildlife agency staff member to encourage more support and protections for wolves. I do want to note again that Lobo Week starts tomorrow. We will be offering a lot of really fun free activities to continue to learn more about wolves. We'll be raffling off a free virtual education program. So if anyone is a teacher or really just wants some one-on-one time with the Ambassador Wolves virtually, feel free to visit our website to see more information about how to enter that free raffle. And I would really like to thank everyone just by joining today's program. You're already indicating that you're curious and invested in creating a more sustainable future. And that's really all we can ask for. So thank you all for taking that first step or that next step and really becoming more invested in the beautiful world around us and how it's all kind of intertwined and how we can really protect wolves by working together and really taking a stance. And so if you do have any further questions, feel free to reach out. I know we had probably a lot of questions that we couldn't get to today just with time. So we'd be happy to answer your questions in a more in-depth fashion over email or the phone. So feel free to reach out. But thank you all so much for supporting wolves, supporting animals, and supporting a better world. Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us this afternoon. You had fantastic questions, a very lively discussion, and we at the Wolf Conservation Center and Catskill Animal Sanctuary are really grateful for your support and hope you have a very relaxing weekend. Bye, everybody.